Everyone, moving on to our next eroder here, and what are we looking at?
Looks like a hole.
Looks like a target.
Yeah, it kind of does. But if you look at it from several angles, it is a big hole. Call it the Eye of God.
And where is this found?
Mauritania, Africa.
It has a special name known as the Riket structure.
Yeah, Riket structure, or Riket hole.
So in the Sahara Desert, we're seeing that there is this formation, bedrock basically being exposed, and the reason is what we're saying up there.
Yeah, wind erosion. If you look real closely here, you see a lot of sand around the area, but that area has been wiped clean of sand and debris. So there must be an agent that's actually making this happen. In this case, it's wind.
So wind is causing what we call deflation of the area when wind picks up materials and moves it somewhere else.
Yeah, it's like a balloon being deflated. It just gets smaller and smaller and smaller in that area because more and more debris gets taken away.
For our erosion agent here, yes, it's wind. The movements of air particles picking up small sediments and moving them from one place to another. We notice these in dry areas. How come?
Well, dry areas have a tendency to only employ mechanical weathering, and mechanical weathering processes like abrasion are very common when wind picks up little small pieces of rocks and breaks it against other rocks. So it's kind of hard to say in this particular instance which one came first, but they're both happening, erosion and weathering.
And like we said with water agents, water pushes things downhill towards the ocean. Well, with wind, you can actually move things uphill. The stronger the wind, the more the movement of the wind, the more the particles can actually be picked up. The faster winds pick up larger particles, and they can move across the ground in kind of these three different ways.
Yeah, creep is just bigger particles rolling along from the wind blowing them.
So they're heavy, they're hard to pick up.
So they require a lot of energy and a very high wind.
Smaller particles, they can bounce across the ground, and when they bounce, they can break up into even smaller pieces.
And it flies all over the area, being placed in places, and they call that saltation.
And then all those particles up in the air are now suspended in the air and can't reach the ground, so we get a suspension. Ways to minimize wind erosion here are things that you can build like windbreakers. Trees are natural windbreakers. How?
They basically stop the wind from blowing through an area. Sometimes bushes are a better source because they act more like a fence. Trees have that area around the bottom that wind can still get through. So a lot of times on the windward side, or the side that the wind's blowing on, of a yard or a hillside, they will put a fence or plant thick shrubbery to stop the wind from blowing through there.
And when the wind stops its movement, we now get deposition. So if the speed of the wind slows or changes direction, material is going to be dropped off very similar to how it's dropped off with.
In fact, water actually forms dune-like things under the water when it drops its sediment. So why not have something like this from wind as well? It's the same process except without the wetness.
And so there's many different shapes to the ways that dunes can be created. So in this image here you can see that because of high moving winds and very drought-like conditions, a lot of sediments were picked up in the atmosphere and pushed across the U.S. back in the Dust Bowl. And since we've got a fence there, we said the wind speed has changed, and when the wind speed changes, all of that sediment was dropped off. Which direction is the wind moving in this picture?
Well, you can tell that from looking at dunes by which side is basically the biggest. So in here, it looks like the wind is moving toward the house, away from us.
So it's getting dropped off at the house and at the fence. If we want to recap our weathering, erosion, and depositional features, the weathering process for wind is
abrasion.
So picking up small particles and sandblasting materials around it. The erosional agent is fast-moving winds. They suspend particles, they push particles across the ground in creeps or saltations. And then for deposition,
you end up with just piles of sand called dunes.
And that's created when the wind slows down or changes direction. So now we've got a third agent that is going to cause weathering, erosion, and deposition.
Yes, we do.
See you next time.